Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I'm Jason Romano. So glad you're tuning into our Sports Spectrum podcast today, part of the Sports Spectrum podcast network. And yes, we got a network of podcasts. If you don't know about them, I want to encourage you to go subscribe and listen to some of our other shows, including our Football Sunday podcast, our Recalibrated show, which is a great show with Mallory Brown interviewing the wives and the girlfriends of different people in the world of sports. And then our Table 40 show, which has been around for almost a year now, maybe 10 months or so. And that features Matt Holliday, the 8-time MLB All-Star, World Series champion, and his wife Leslie, interviewing couples, the athletes, the former players, and their wives and girlfriends, and talking about faith and sports and marriage and family and life. It's really a great show. And we got more shows coming down the pike here in 2021 that we're really excited about. So we want to encourage you to go to sportspectrum.com for all of our content and make sure you're subscribing to all of our podcasts on the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. And listen, this show right here, the flagship show that you're listening to right now, 2 million downloads since we launched about 4 years ago. And God has provided us with an audience. We had 1 million downloads of this podcast in 2020. 1 million. That's just an insane number when I say it out loud. But it's all a tribute to you guys. Like, we're just putting these interviews out, doing the best that we can with them. But it's clearly making a dent. And there's, in the stories of the people that we have on, like Arnold today, who's a great example of that, they just have amazing stories to tell. And that's really what we want to do, is just intersect the world of sports with the world of faith in Jesus and bring these conversations to you. Because there's not a lot out there that live in this space. There's a lot of faith podcasts. There's a lot of sports podcasts or sports content, but not a lot that combine the two. And that's where we fall into place with Sports Spectrum. So we're so glad that you tuned in today. Arnold is our guest. He is the author of the new book, Chaos Can't: Overcome What Comes Against You in This Shaken World. And so we talk chaos today with Arnold. He's also the executive producer for content for Wild at Heart Ministries, which is a ministry that's led by John Eldridge. And Alan has oversaw the launch of more than 500 novels in his previous life as a former fiction publisher, and now he helps people live a better story. He's also a former middle school and high school basketball coach, and we talk a lot about parenting, talk a lot about being a fan in the midst of chaos, and then we talk about this book and how it can help us as people truly trust in God and be controlled in the chaos. This is Arnold, author of the new book, Chaos Can't. And by the way, we're going to be giving away a copy of this book, Chaos Can't. And I'll tell you about that at the end of our conversation. So make sure you're listening to the end. And it's going to be a real easy way to enter. And all you got to do is listen to the end to find out how. The book is called Chaos Can't. The author is Arnold, and he joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. So this is a real treat for me to talk to Arnold. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. And this book, Chaos Can't, it could not have come at a better time with what this world has been going through for the last almost year or so. I'm sure that exactly, you didn't have that planned out, you thinking that we would be in the middle of a pandemic and a racial divide and a political divide and everything else that took place, right?
I wrote it in the middle of all that, but I had been coaching and teaching on it for about 3 years. And when I started, it was like when I would bring up chaos, people would kind of turn their head and go, "What are you talking about, man? Like, why would we be interested in chaos and overcoming it?" But as time went on, it became more and more relevant. And the book came out in the middle of everything, kind of. And the reason I think, Jason, it matters is because of this. We all get hit with chaos. And so if we're reactive, we're constantly trying to figure out what's going on. We're getting sidelined. We're not at our best. And if we can be proactive about it, we can actually live, I believe, chaos-free right in the middle of a world of chaos. And 2020 and 2021 so far are both pretty chaotic times. And so what I want to do is help people look at chaos in a new way so they can live through it in a new way.
That's good. I want to go deeper into that in just a second. But for our audience that may not know who you are or even know what Wild at Heart Ministries is, can you share a little bit about the work you've done? We had John Eldridge on the podcast, I think in 2020 at some point in the fall, which was really cool to talk to him as well.
Yes.
And I love his voice and his influence, particularly for men. So tell us about the role you have and particularly working with Wild at Heart and some of the other things you're doing.
Sure. So about 9 years ago, I joined Wild at Heart, and my whole role is content. So before that, I was a fiction publisher, started a fiction division, helped launch about 500 plus novels, all kinds of novels for over a decade. So I've always loved story and content. And I believe that's because we learn the most through story, that when we see our lives as story, we start to live differently, better, more purposefully. And so about 9 years ago, I joined Wild at Heart, and that ministry is really about how men primarily, but men and women can get their hearts back. And so that really appealed to me. It really had an impact on me. It's a group of about 12, 15 people, small team with a massive impact in the world. We have millions of books out, translated in pretty much every language. And it's a great team. It's a team of guys and women who basically say, if you want to live with more passion and more purpose, then there's a way to awaken your heart. And we help them do that. So I get to do that. I produce a podcast every week called Wild at Heart. Has a pretty huge audience. We also have a podcast for millennial guys called And Sons. I produce that. It's for young men in their 20s and 30s. And then I help John with the creation and development of his books and videos and audios.
I love that. I mean, we can nerd out all day, Alan, seriously, on content. Because yes, I host this show, but I have been and continue to produce content and have done that for 25 years. So I'm sure you and I can overlap and talk a lot of shop. I will ask one question that sort of it becomes a nerdy question, maybe for people who don't care about content as much as you and I do. But yes. 2020 was unlike any year we've ever had, obviously, from all that took place. But from a content perspective, whether it's through the Christian space or the secular space, even with my old friends at ESPN, we all had to pivot a little bit and figure out new ways to communicate when we couldn't be together in person. And I think Sports Spectrum, because we are actually very built the same way as your ministry is, very small. It's a team of 13 or 14 in the entire ministry. And for Sports Spectrum, it's really 3 or 4 of us that do all of the work that we're doing. I don't think our audience is as large as yours, but it's still an exciting time. A few people doing a lot of things, but we had to pivot and, think about alternative ways and content as well. So what was that like for you when March 11th happens and the pandemic's declared and everything shut down?
Right. Well, we all of a sudden had to start working from home. We had to make sure the equipment we just take for granted, the podcast studio, all of the developmental equipment, all of a sudden we're in our home study or the basement. And yet life is going on and people are wanting the content more than ever because now they're home and they can't get out. And so we did have to pivot. We had to ask ourselves, what does content even mean? Because we are mainly live event company or ministry. So we have events with about 450 guys or 500 guys, women at different campsites and venues across the world. And we had to cancel. We had one in UK last May that we had to cancel. So we had to learn anew, how do we talk to people in ways that we're not even together as a team. And so we mastered the Zoom call. We started having weekly Zoom conversations, and we thought we'd have a few hundred people. We ended up having double, triple, quadruple that, depending on what the conversation was. And we learned how to break people out in Zoom rooms where you could have smaller group chats. And we got really good at that. And we had been working on that actually a year earlier out of curiosity, not knowing we would need it so quick. But here's the thing, our voice and our reach actually grew last year, even though we could be less places in person. So, the silver lining was more people now know about Wild at Heart. More people are listening to the podcast. More people are tuning into these Zoom gatherings. So we have navigated well, and man, we're ready to be back in person.
Well, that's true. And I will say we saw the same thing. I work remotely anyway, so I guess I was probably more equipped in a pandemic to deal with a pandemic and social distance than most people because I do work from home. But I was traveling a lot and going to Colorado where our Sports Spectrum offices are and, going to conferences and things like that, a lot of the things that you were describing, and all of that got put on pause. But I think for all of us, we all want to get back in person for sure.
Right.
There's nothing like being in a room with 1,000 men raising their hands, praising Jesus. There's nothing like that. But now it's at least forced us all, maybe this is with you as well, to say, okay, we can do that and still do some of the things that we implemented because of the pandemic, right?
Exactly. The lessons we've learned, we're going to continue in. We're not just going to abandon once everything kind of shifts back to live events and in person. We've realized we can reach people in so many more powerful ways than we had been. And so it's broadened our perspective of what's possible. And that's exciting to me because, when you give content to people in a way they want it, then they can decide how to experience it. So the guys, they can come to a live event of 500 guys or 1,000, or they can watch it Tuesday morning in their, shorts and a t-shirt from home. Yeah. And the content stays the same. The experience may be different, but it's given us a whole new tool belt of ways to reach people.
Alan Arnold is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. He's got a new book. It's called Chaos Can't Overcome What Comes Against You in This Shaken World, it was released, I should say, in October of 2020. So we love testimonies. We love stories here, especially with the athletes and different people that we talk to on Sports Spectrum. Can you share your testimony a little bit with us? Tell us how you came to Christ, and even in that, maybe share the role that sports has played in your life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason, I would start by saying I was a very driven man. I'm in my mid-50s right now, and I'm a very different person in the last decade than I was the first, I would say, 40 years of my life. And in those first 40 years, it was all about make it happen, win the game, be productive, be the last man standing. I used to have a fortune cookie saying on my desk that I taped down for years that I kind of was my mantra to live by, which was the one who says it can't be done should get out of the way of the one already doing it. And that was like my whole mission was I'll be the last guy standing. I'll make it happen, to the point where this was right before 9/11. I had a video crew. We were going to do an author film shoot. The video crew got on a plane and I was distracted on my phone. I look up, everybody's on the plane. And I can see the plane through the plate glass window. It's a small, American Eagle type plane. And the lady working there at the desk said, "Sorry, you missed your flight." And I tried to talk her into getting on. And she said that your seat's already been given away. You need to just leave, sir. So when she walked away, I was so driven that I just went through the emergency exit, walked down the tarmac, and stood in front of the plane. Literally just stood in front of the plane. And the pilot, thankfully, nobody shot me, but right. The pilot gets out of the plane and he's like, "What are you doing, man?" And I'm like, I'm waiting for you to let me on the plane. And I actually talked my way on the plane, get the guy kicked out that's in my seat. And everybody on the plane is furious at me, except for the video crew who didn't know where they were going. But that was the me that I was. And I was a Christian at that time. But the thing is, I based my identity on what I could make happen, how big the last win was. And I was always trying to do more because I thought that meant I could be more. So my testimony is one of a guy who knew a lot about God growing up in church, but didn't understand that my identity wasn't based on what I did. And so I saw God as basically crossed arms, wanting me to do more all the time. And if I got to my end of myself, I guess I could throw a white flag up. But otherwise, he just wanted me to get busy and get things done. So it was a terrible perception of God. It was resulting in me being very successful, but very empty. And it was only when my boss, when I was the publisher, my boss came up to me one day and he said, "Alan, do you know you've got a team of a bunch of people that love the success you bring them, but can't stand your presence. They don't want to be around you because you're just such a hard driven guy that you're no fun to be around." And that was a wake-up call for me. And at that point, I started a journey of really what I would call sonship. What does it mean to be a son of God? What does it mean to be the kind of man that brings life instead of drains life from the settings he's in? And it changed my whole way of seeing God as Father and really me as son. So even though I accepted Christ when I was 12 and had been really in a church my whole life, it was only in my 40s that I got to know God as a father instead of knowing a lot of details about him.
Wow. I love that story. And I love that it was a process for you, because I think there are a lot of people that can relate or that find themselves doing things, obviously, like I think Paul talks about in Romans, like I'm doing the very thing I know I shouldn't do. And for a lot of us as Christians, I mean, my hands up, I've been a Christian for 20 years now. And at the same time, for me, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. So I find myself falling back into those things, especially when it comes to sports. And we were talking about this beforehand. You said that you were a middle and high school basketball coach and also, have kids who played sports. And that kind of creeped into your fandom and your coaching as well, didn't it?
Right. I played as a young man all the way through high school and college. I went to Texas A&M. I didn't play on their team, but I played a lot of intramural. And then when I had kids, I became a coach from when they were like 4 in the YMCA all the way up to middle school coaching and even high school coaching. And especially 2 of my 3 are rabid basketball fans. Eat, drink it. It's been so hard during all the restrictions and trying to play in a mask or there's no fans that can come to some games.
Yeah.
But when I was a coach, it was one of the greatest joys of my life because I was learning how to put strategy in also to the story of those kids' lives and helping them understand not just how to score a basket or how to win a game, but what is the bigger story that God's invited you into as an athlete and as a young man or woman. And I think, Jason, we had a really successful run through my son and daughter's teams over the course of probably 10, 12 seasons. And the reason was because by that point, I was not living in that place I described earlier. In other words, to me, one of the saddest things are coaches that their own identity is on the line. And so they're out there just driving these kids as hard as they can because they, as a man or woman, can't stand the thought of losing a game because their identity is wrapped up in that win. And so they're kind of miserable to be, on a team. If you're the kid, there's a lot of fear, and fear doesn't lead to greatness. And so I was able to be much more free at that time to go, yeah, I want to win and I'm going to really put the time in, but I'm going after these kids' hearts. And the story is how they're going to change during the season. And I think we'll win a lot of games, but my identity is not tied as a coach to win or loss. It's tied to what I'm pouring into these kids. So it was a phenomenal kind of a Camelot time for me, and made such great friendships with the kids and got to know my own son and daughter better in the process. So it was a beautiful time. But I got to tell you that everything I'm describing about me as a coach, which I felt like I stepped into really well as a fan, as my daughter's a senior this year in high school. And I don't feel I'm qualified to be a coach of a senior basketball team. I know I'm over my limit of, bags of tricks and strategies and plays, and I can't do it full time. So now as a fan, when I'm watching, I find myself really in the past, like getting irate at, the ref or a player on the other team that does something dirty and your daughter gets knocked over, and the ref doesn't call it. And I would find myself as a fan not being nearly, as patient or big picture as I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so it got to the point, just to keep it really short, a few years ago, it got to the point where once I had quit coaching them and they were getting higher and higher up, I would be getting so frustrated at the other fans and refs that my wife was like, honey, you have got to get, you're getting too riled up in these games. And I'd gotten kicked out of a couple of games, trying to do the right thing, but I was letting chaos in me. And so then I finally, I ended up wearing headphones to games, listening to classical music. And then my wife quit sitting by me because she was like, you're not as riled up because you can't hear anything, but I can't talk to you. And so I'm sitting there in the stands with my headphones on, noise reducing headphones, trying to manage my own feelings of chaos and going, there's got to be a better way. Because now my wife isn't sitting by me. Nobody's sitting by me. My daughter's looking at me and son when they're playing like, Dad, don't say, you're trying to help me, but don't say anything. Yeah. And I was like, this is not, I was coaching so well and so calmly, but I wasn't parenting in the stands as a fan well at all. And I was getting sucked into the toxicity of others and of just, my own. And so that was one of the catalysts for this book, actually, was I don't want to be that man. I don't want to be that chaotic guy that is good when things are good and chaotic when things are chaotic. And so I learned a lot of lessons through sports for sure on that.
I'll tell you something, you're speaking a lot of the language that I speak, unfortunately, in the sense that, I needed my wife to talk me off the ledge, yelling at umpires or pretending like I know more about sports than everybody else, which there are times when I think I can walk out there and say, I know more about sports than you because I worked at ESPN or whatever. My wife's like, you just stop. Would you just be quiet and would you just enjoy watching your daughter play softball? My daughter plays softball and she plays volleyball. She's actually a junior in high school this year, so she's a year younger than your daughter. But I can't imagine being the guy up in the corner with the headphones on either and everybody looking at. So that's the punishment. I'm taking it, Alan. That's the punishment. This guy can't stop yelling. So we're putting him in the corner with noise canceling headphones so that he can still watch the game.
Well, and the thing is, you think, I'm going to speak for me, but I used to think, man, I used to be a coach. I know what's going on. I know what the refs should be doing. I know what the other team should be not doing or trying or what's illegal. And so I went into it thinking I was actually helping. But man, Jason, when you look at the face of your wife or somebody close to you or your kid on the court, you can tell pretty much Dad's not helping or this guy is not helping because I'm looking at the face of the people I love and they're looking at me like, dude, you need to calm down.
Yes.
You're not helping. And so, that's when I really started asking myself, like, am I just a reactionary person who, if somebody in the stands is yelling, then and even sometimes I would be the guy to go, I'm going to get up and tell that other guy to be quiet. Because he's the toxic guy. But when Scripture talks about when you confront a fool, you become the level of the fool pretty quickly. When you're looking at the different proverbs, like if you engage a fool, you quickly become a fool.
Yes.
And it's not long before you're both making a big scene. And so part of my journey out of chaos was in basketball courts across the country going, this is not the guy I want to be. I want to be the guy enjoying the game, win or lose, fair or not fair. I want to be able to sit there and cheer my kids on and the team on and be the guy that people want in the stands. So, the good news is it is possible. I do that now. I am that guy now.
That's good.
But it took far too many games for me as a dad, as a parent, to identify what was really happening and say, I want to chart a different course.
Let's take a quick break to tell you about our brand new partners and sponsors here at Sports Spectrum, our friends at Convoy of Hope. They are a faith-based nonprofit organization with a driving passion to feed the world through the children's feeding initiatives, community outreaches, and disaster responses. In the United States and throughout the world right now, countless families are living on the fringe or have fallen into the depths of poverty and suffering. And right now, we need you to join and come be a part of the starting lineup. See, your favorite players and teams are partnering right now with Convoy of Hope to fight hunger, poverty, and suffering in the United States and throughout the world. In doing so, you can advocate, give, network, and volunteer to help ensure that those in need receive hot meals, groceries, haircuts, health and dental screenings, family portraits, socks, shoes, clothing, school supplies, hygiene kits, and much more. To learn more and be a part of the great work Convoy of Hope is doing, you can visit them now at convoynation.com, CONVOY nation.com. We're also presented today by our friends at Water Mission, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry that fights the global water crisis with safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions in developing countries and disaster areas. Right now, they are working. Let's do that again. Here we go. Picking it up. 3, 2, 1. We're also presented today by Water Mission, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry fighting the global water crisis. And right now they're working to stop that global spread of COVID-19 by providing urgently needed safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. They do such important work. The Water Mission teams are actually first responders. When disasters occur, Water Mission can have water treatment systems on the ground and operational within 48 hours. And in addition to being on the front line of emergency response efforts, Water Mission provides its technology, expertise, and solutions to other relief agencies worldwide. You can learn more and pray with Water Mission and donate by checking out the website, watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis, watermission.org. He is Alan Arnold, and again, the book is called Chaos Can't: Overcome What Comes Against You in This Shaken World, released in October of 2020. His website's withalan.com. It's 2 L's, withalan.com. I do want to get a little bit more into the book, and I noticed on page 73, you write, chaos cannot invade your domain, your heart, and your head without your permission. It wants you to believe you have no choice but to become chaotic when chaos hits. You write, that's a lie. So I want to get into why that is exactly a lie. Alan, tell us about that.
Yeah. So let me give you, the way I first realized it was a lie was a sports scenario. And that is, we had a chance to win a championship game in high school a few years ago with my son's team. And the other team that we were playing, we had already beat during the normal season. And so this is the championship game. We knew we could beat them, although they were a great team. But they started the game and caught us off guard with a full court press from the very first play, the very first throw-in of the, once there was a throw-in. And I know most people listening are familiar with a full court press in basketball, but, the goal is they're on your side of the court and the other team is trying to create what? Chaos. Yeah. They are trying to freak you out, panic your players out, so something stupid happens and you throw the ball away or lose it, and they go in for the easy layup or shot. And so as a coach, I quickly learned I've got to get my team to, even in the face of chaos, realize they don't have to be chaotic. And so we started practicing and practicing. We lost that game because we got behind 20 points in the first 5 minutes. And so that
5 minutes. Wow.
Yeah. It was, they were really good at it and we really crumbled under it.
Yeah.
But in future seasons, when I was coaching those same guys, my team, I helped them realize with chaos all around you, you don't have to panic, because the worst thing you can do is put your head down in those situations and go into a corner and what I would call turtle up. You're hugging the ball and you're lost at that point. Yeah. Well, we do that all the time with chaos in our life. And just as in a game, the best strategy for a full court press to break it is go down the middle. You go down the middle with your head up. You're aware of what they're doing, but you don't get caught in the corner. You don't panic. And so that's really with us what I realized. When chaos comes, we have a choice. We either can start letting it in by letting it in, Jason, I mean, we can start saying things like, yeah, of course, like everything's going crazy. Like, of course I'm upset and of course I'm fearful. And yes, if this happens in my world, of course I'm going to panic or overreact or, why isn't life fair? Why can't I find a break? And we start saying these things that stir up panic and fear, and that gets in our heart. And yet Jesus says, and this is what I love, like if you want to anchor verse for what we're talking about, John 16:33, yes. Jesus says, I'm telling you these things so that you may have peace in this world. And we all go, yes, like give me peace. I want peace. What are you telling me that will give me peace? And then what he says is really counterintuitive. He says, I'm telling you this so you'll have peace. In this world, you will have trouble or chaos.
Or chaos, that's right.
Yeah, and it's like, well, that doesn't make me feel very peaceful. Like you're saying you're going to give me peace, and now you're telling me the world is chaotic. But in that same verse, he ends by saying, but take heart because I have overcome the world. And what's so key about that to me is, one, Jesus is refreshing honesty. He's being so transparent. Hey, don't be caught off guard by chaos. You will have chaos in this world. We had it in 2020. We're having it in 2021. In this world, you don't get a free pass at chaos. But when Jesus says, I've overcome the world, to me, that's the equivalent, and I say this in the book, of like if you're on a boat with a captain and there's icebergs, and he's saying, on this boat ride, have peace because I have overcome, and you think he's going to say the icebergs. Okay, great. You've overcome the icebergs. I'm in. But the captain is saying, have peace because I've overcome the entire ocean. Every bit of water in the world I've overcome. Yeah. Now that's a captain. And that's what Jesus is saying. Every past, present, and future source of chaos, he's saying, I've already dealt with it. I've already overcome it. So come with me and have peace. Yes, there's going to be chaos, but you can be chaos free, because if you think about it, Jesus, his whole life was chaos free. Every story we read about Jesus was chaotic. I mean, everything was chaotic about everywhere he went. Yeah. There were demoniacs, there were healings, there were storms, physical storms, there were riots, there were crowds. But he always, if you look at it this way, brought beauty, life, and order out of the chaos. And even in the temple scene with the money changers, and people say, well, but didn't he like bring a whip in and make a whip and turn tables over? Yes, he did. But he did that. It takes a long time to make a whip. So he's patiently doing something to bring order into what was a disordered system. So even in times where Jesus is bringing a real strength and a real force, he's not chaotic. He's actually bringing order out of the chaos. And that's the invitation I think that Jesus gives us is, if you want to live chaos free, come with me and I'll show you how to bring order from disorder, not just put up with chaos, but actually go through it without becoming chaotic. And then the deeper invitation is we get to change the chaos into beauty, life, and order.
That's so well said. And isn't it funny? Because so many of us, I think we don't want the chaos. So we do everything we can to prevent the chaos and to keep things calm and to stay, almost in our own little bubbles, for lack of a better word, in what we've been in 2020 and 2021. But we almost don't want that. And yet here's Jesus, the Savior, saying, no, it's going to come. You can't avoid it. It's going to happen, whether it's on a grand scale or even on a very personal scale. And I think about people who deal with tragedy, deal with death. And I've seen some people who don't deal so well with it, even Christians, but I've seen many who have this calm, talk about the peace that passes all understanding, right? Which is in essence what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And yet it's not that they're not happy in they're happy with their circumstances, but there's a peace that helps them understand that there's something bigger going on and that they can still be calm in chaos. Because listen, when a person passes away that's close to you, it's going to get chaotic. It just is. It's, on whatever level that type of death is, whether it's somebody who's older or somebody who's, God forbid, younger. But that's really what we're talking about here, because that transfers into the sports world too. I really believe, I love the analogy you said, because the football players I talk to, I hear about controlled chaos a lot, especially in football, in basketball as well. I think of the old UNLV teams and the Arkansas teams from the mid-90s in college hoops, who all they did was try to create chaos, but they were controlled in the chaos. That's really what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, it is. And like you said, to wish there was no chaos, that's a great wish. Like, I get it. Yeah. But it's like, that's why I lost the championship game with my son. I wish the other team would quit doing the full court press, because we were getting behind in the minutes in an insurmountable lead that they had that we couldn't overcome the rest of the game. Yeah. But it doesn't matter if I wish there was no chaos. They were bringing chaos at us, and we had a choice. The only choice we had is, how do we respond? And so the response that we have in this world, we don't really have a choice whether there is chaos. But here's a cool thing, and I'll mention it briefly, but if people are interested, it's in the book. But as a coach, you and I know the very first lesson you teach a team is crucial. Like, if you have a bunch of things you want to teach them, But how you start is like it sets the tone of the whole season. It sets the tone of that whole experience. Well, God, in the very beginning of Genesis, what is the first thing that he teaches us? What is the very first lesson that our Creator teaches us? Well, it's probably pretty important. And in Genesis 1:1, we read that scripture everybody pretty much knows. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In other words, God is creator. But Genesis 1:2 is where the first lesson begins. And it's a verse most people don't know. And in Genesis 1:2, it's before the days of creation. That's 1:3. But in the second verse, we read the Spirit of God goes into the empty void. And scholars would say that's chaos. Before the world was formed, God's Spirit goes in to chaos. And what happens? Does God get fearful or run away or say, I'm going to come back when things are less chaotic? No, he goes into the chaos and he changes it. From the chaos comes beauty, life, and order. In other words, God's response to chaos is creation. And so that's the first lesson he shows us. And so as his sons and daughters, now I believe his invitation to you and to me and to every listener is, right, the chaos in the world, don't hunker down, don't hide from it. Don't think you'll start doing the thing that you were given that you love to do whenever things calm down, because things aren't going to calm down. Not completely, because we live in a world of chaos.
Yeah. So
the invitation is go into it and change it. Bring beauty, life, and order through your gifting and creativity and your calling as a coach, as an architect, as a teacher, as a sports, podcast creator, like whatever your role is, go into the world and make it better because of who you are. And that's what diffuses chaos.
That's good stuff there. He is Alan Arnold. All right, I want to end with this. This is kind of a lighter note, I guess. So your bio in the back of your book and on your website, and I'm holding the book right now. By the way, I want to tell people, we got a copy I'm going to give away here. The copy I'm holding in my hand, I want to give away to a listener. So at the end of this podcast, after we're finished, I'll tell you how you can win a copy of Chaos Camp from Alan Arnold. Okay. On the back, it says, he loves blue oceans, black coffee, hot salsa, and big ideas. So I like the blue oceans thing. I'm not a coffee drinker. I've never been a coffee drinker. I'm guessing black coffee might be the worst kind, but you love it. So that's good for you. Hot salsa. I'm not a spicy guy, Alan. I can't handle the hot salsa. Nah, I can't. I'm a wimpy wings guy. That's what I tell people. When we're going out for wings, I'm having the wimpy wings. I'm having the barbecue. I can't go to spice. It just...
You're the kind of guy that sounds like that thinks toothpaste is spicy.
Well, that's another conversation for another time. Okay, but I am a wimpy. I'm a spicy guy for sure, or not a spicy guy for sure. But the big ideas part, I like the last line, and big ideas. So I love big ideas here, and I probably have too many of them when I go to my bosses about where we might go or what we might be doing. So I'll close the conversation here with a big idea from you. What is a big idea that you've been thinking about? What's a big idea that's got you fired up maybe over the last few years? What's a big idea that has you, I mean, you put it in the back of your book, Alan, so you got to be thinking about one here. What's a big idea that's been getting you going?
So here's a big idea for me is, and this is what actually last night I was doodling in a notebook or a journal about a future book idea. And that is, first of all, I believe everybody listening is creative. We're all creative. So when I say creatives, I don't mean some elite group. We are sons and daughters of the Creator. We have his DNA in us. We are creative.
Yes.
And so what I believe is, in whatever field we find ourselves making our living or spending our days or our hobbies, that creativity plays out. And so what I was doing the other day is asking this: why do we, as people who have creativity, always try to bottle the creativity like bottled lightning? Like, why do we try to catch ideas and then bottle them? And by bottle, I mean, we get the idea and then we want to capture it and then we want to control it. And then we want to try to repeat it over and over and over again. And so, if you're successful in something, you keep trying to do that, recreate that same thing. And it's like trying to expect lightning to hit the same place twice. So what I was writing about is, how would our world change if we actually lived from a more free place of ideas? Meaning, when we had a big idea, we ran with all our passion, with everything we had toward that. And then we didn't expect that idea to be what carried us through the next week or the next month or the next year. But so in other words, like at our ministry, we have a conference. We had thousands of people at one a few years ago. Well, the natural human instinct is we're going to do this again 12 months from now, same group, same place. And instead to go, that might have been a one-time thing that was huge because it was a fresh idea. Now, what's the next fresh idea? And if we can start seeing our lives that way, a good buddy of mine refers to our lives as test flights. If we could start seeing our lives and seasons of our lives is whether we're 40 or 50 or 60 or 20 as I'm in a test flight, I'm learning, I'm going to try new things. I'm going to go all out, play all out. And if it works, that's not going to define me and I'm not going to get stuck there. And I think if we live that way, man, whether we're coaching a team or whether we're writing the next bestseller, book, we need freshness instead of formula. And we as humans gravitate to the formula. And I'm trying to live now out of formula and into new frontier that has no formula. So that was what I was like just doodling last night of that there seems to be something in that for me in this new year. And it feels like a big idea, but that's where I was last night, was pondering that over a cigar.
That's a great answer. I love that. And it doesn't have to be an idea that you had and it blossomed into this huge thing. It's just the big idea. Sometimes it's thinking about the big idea as opposed to actually implementing it. So that's really good stuff. He is Alan Arnold. Again, the book Chaos Can't. Stay tuned after this conversation. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you how you can win a copy. The subtitle, Overcome What Comes Against You in This Shaken World. Alan Arnold, thanks, my friend. Thanks for joining us. All the best to you and the ministry, and hopefully we'll be in touch, and maybe I'll be able to come down and have a spicy wing with you at some point in the spring. So how's that sound?
That sounds awesome. I'll have a cup of black coffee waiting for you.
Thanks, Alan. And many thanks to Alan Arnold, the author of the book Chaos Can't, for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. I could have gone another hour with him recording. I did go about another half hour with him after we stopped recording, just talking to him about books and publishing and a bunch of other different things about what true success is. So it was a really good conversation. I hope you enjoyed Alan on the show today. I really liked getting to know him. You can check out all of his content again at his website, withallen.com, A-L-L-E-N, withallen.com. And here's a chance now for you to win a copy of this book. It's a fantastic book that can encourage you, I know, on your journey to overcome what comes against us in this shaken world. The book is called Chaos Can't. Here's how you can win. It's really simple. I want you to email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. That's it, jason@sportspectrum.com. Let me know that you heard this interview with Alan Arnold. So mention Alan Arnold's name, and you'll be entered into an opportunity to win a copy of the book. We'll just pick a random name. I'll grab all the names after a few days, and then we'll pick a name out of the hat, and we'll notify you that you won, a copy of Chaos Can't from Alan Arnold. Make sure you include your name and your information as well so we can get in touch with you in the email. But you can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com, and let me know about Alan Arnold's interview, and you'll be entered. Can't wait to hear from you, all of you who are interested in winning a copy of Alan's book, and we can't wait to see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. My name is Jason. Have a great rest of your day. Please do stay safe.